Amid a constant stream of troubling revelations about Hunter Biden's business and the FBI's attempts, I guess, to look into it, our government's attempts to look into it or perhaps provide some measure of accountability, there's a new headline actually in The Federalist out this week by a story from Margot Cleveland. The Department of Justice may have obstructed important Biden corruption investigations out of Pittsburgh and Delaware. The crux of the story is that FBI headquarters either, one, improperly withheld information or presented inaccurate information to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh, but also possibly in Delaware. There was a story in Vice News this week on the other hand, that provided, I mean, it was pretty much like a version of the Peter Strzok story, but with the parties flipped. This is the Vice headline: ICE agent in sex trafficking unit donated to GOP and then days later went to investigate Hunter Biden. The Hunter Biden story, I think, is so convoluted. It reminds me of the Russia hoax to begin with. There were so many, the collusion stories to begin with. They were so convoluted and so layered, and every little drip, it was like you had to be following the plot so closely. You had to have been sort of like furiously turning the pages and tuned into every detail, Ryan. But do you have a reaction to some of the information that we learned this week? I'll add to that also that Fox News did a review and found about 14 different people that Joe Biden had met with over the course of his vice presidency who had ties and sometimes very direct links to Hunter Biden's business. That would be foreign nationals that Hunter Biden was lobbying on behalf of, or sometimes like Ricchetti and others that were just, American people caught up in his sort of network of business and social connections on the American side. So with all of this constantly coming out and these updates just this week, what do you make of where the inquiries into the propriety of Hunter Biden's businesses stand?
I think that the increasing politicization of the FBI, partisan politicization, it has obviously always been a political organization, deployed pretty viciously in its early days against communists, then deployed viciously against the civil rights movement, more recently deployed in other kind of political ways. But now you're seeing partisan politics seep into it in a way that that had to happen. It's a kind of a new it's a new thing that's happening now, and so you have these twin instances of potentially some FBI agents appearing to maybe cover for Hunter Biden, as you talked about in the Pittsburgh case, and then you have some who are going overboard and overzealously going after him through a partisan lens, similar to how you mentioned that there was, like Strzok may have done himself, and so it's going to start to undermine what public faith is left in federal law enforcement, and the
rule of law itself.
It gets dangerous when that becomes that. Mm-hmm. That's when that's one of the stages of losing a kind of what we call a democracy, is when you have politicized law enforcement branches that are just targeting political enemies,
and that's the road
in order to satisfy political patrons.
100%. And that's exactly, it looks like something from us. You've said this before, and I think it's really apt, that like us from the outside looking in on other countries and their systems of government, we say this is the slippery slope to a banana republic. And this is how you end up with January 6th over and over again in different contexts, because when people lose faith in the rule of law, when people lose faith in law enforcement and the government's ability to provide fair judgment on either side, and you can argue that that's always been frustrated by partisan influence. Of course it has, but it's a question of degree. And I think all of this suggests that the degree is in a really odd direction, really bad direction. And in fact, this Federalist story is also a piece of media criticism. This stems a lot from Chuck Grassley, who announced that multiple FBI whistleblowers, including those in senior positions, had accused the Washington field office of the FBI of falsely portraying as disinformation evidence acquired from multiple sources that provided the FBI derogatory information related to Hunter Biden's financial and foreign business activities, even though some of that information had already been verified or could be verified. And then Margot Cleveland goes on to criticize the New York Times. She says the Times reporting is factually accurate. This is reporting from 2 years ago, which even the New York legacy outlet's coverage earlier this year confirms in two respects. First, the, quote, money laundering aspect of the Delaware inquiry into Hunter Biden had not, quote, fizzled out, but according to their sources, remains a part of the Delaware U.S. Attorney General's grand jury investigation. And second, the laptop, the famous laptop, contained evidence supportive of the money laundering probe and potentially other crimes. So what you have here is the media uncritically regurgitating leaks from the FBI, or without due criticism or sufficient skepticism, regurgitating leaks from law enforcement, and law enforcement itself being a partisan actor in its pursuit of justice and its pursuit of the public relations campaign. And so not only do you have the law enforcement acting questionably, you also then have the media going along with it, which I think is gets to that other question of how new this is, of how seriously we've ratcheted up on that spectrum of undue influence or the rule of law kind of crumbling amid partisan influence.
And it becomes difficult to follow it for a lot of people, especially as, the entire kind of liberal sector of the media is mostly not interested in the story. So if you're somebody who's interested in the story and you know some of the details, when you start to share those details with people, with friends, with family, or share them on air, you start to sound like a crazy person, because you're talking about all of these different people and all of these different connections that people aren't at all familiar with. Whereas in the other ecosystem, they're all just completely understood and just completely taken for granted. 10% for the big guy is like a meme on the right. If you say it on the left, people are like, what? Who's the big guy? What's a 10%? Like legitimately, they were like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
And that's like, how do you have a national conversation under those circumstances?
Well, yeah. And again, this is not to just belabor this point, but this is how you do end up in January 6th type situations, because the trust is completely gone. So people have created their own ecosystems, and powerful people exploit that for their benefit. And this is something the FBI is actively exploiting for its benefit by going to the New York Times for more favorable coverage that may obscure their own wrongdoing. And it sucks, especially on this issue, because as the Fox News Digital report, I think, really highlighted this week, when you had all of these clients of Hunter Biden's in and out of the Naval Observatory when Joe Biden was vice president, or even the White House when he was vice president, or he was going, one of the obvious anecdotes is he's going to Cafe Milano to meet with Hunter's business clients at different events over the course of his vice presidency. That is not something that's partisan. That's something that people on the left and the right should be extremely uncomfortable with, and should have pretty open questions about how it's affecting the Biden presidency, especially as there is legislation in Congress that is going to come to his desk that affects China. He's dealing with Ukraine right now. We know that Hunter Biden had a stake in, he was basically helping trade on his influence when it came to one interest in Ukraine, at least. And so, yeah, I think it just really, really sucks that there's no trust left. And it does, to your point, remind me a lot of the Russia stories. It was impossible. I had a really hard time following people who were saying this is the intelligence community. It is a partisan information operation from the intelligence community, and the media is going along with it. But you had to really follow it closely to finally start peeling back those layers and figuring it out. And that's in large part because the media was weaponized by the FBI, basically. And it's very, very hard for the rest of us to sort through everything.
Maybe they need to start doing kind of committees in pairs. Like whenever Democrats want to investigate something, Republicans will agree to join them. If Democrats will then join them investigating what the Republicans want to investigate. So you don't get 4 years of just Benghazi followed by whatever else. So like, all right, let's set up you want to do a Hunter Biden committee? Go ahead, have fun. Democrats get to do a Jared Kushner committee, and Republicans have to be on the Jared Kushner committee, and Democrats will agree to be on the Hunter Biden committee. And hey, we can do it in prime time. Make them serialized podcasts like with January 6th.
Interesting idea. Also, Republicans, by the way, would be so happy to jump on that Jared Kushner committee.
There you
because
go.
so many of the hardcore Trump loyalists are they've been exasperated with Jared Kushner from day one, and there would be plenty of material for that committee, just as there's plenty of material for the Hunter Biden committee. So I like Ryan's idea. I feel like should we put this in writing? Should we send this from the desk of Ryan Grim straight to Chuck Grassley?
It's free. It's free for Congress to watch. I mean, free for Congress to use, as long as they're sitting around watching or listening on the podcast, as might be the way that busy people on the go are consuming this product. But no,
you're wrong to imply that Congress
free advice.
Is busy.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, we actually know that probably it's safe to assume some members at least are watching and listening, because this is my favorite thing to watch is sometimes Ryan Grim drops something in a radar and Democratic lawmakers start talking about it. So I think they're definitely listening.
Well, then here's some more. Here's another free one. Do the Kushner committee, and you'll find plenty of Republicans that'll join you.
That's right. Well, that does it for us on this edition of Rising Fridays. We really appreciate you watching us and hope that you have fun as we sort through all of this often troubling, disturbing news here on Rising Fridays. We try to at least find the silver lining as often as we possibly can, even when it's difficult. And for those of you who want to listen while you're on the go, as Ryan just mentioned, you can find us anywhere podcasts are available. Robbie and Brianna will be back with all of you next week, and we will see you all next Friday. That does it for us.
All right, have a great weekend, everybody.